All right, I guess maybe a third time is going to be a charm. First time I fucked up pretty bad with the microphone. And then the second time somebody called me on the phone. That was an important phone call. I had to get back to them. We're going to go. And by the way, there was a guy, Tom Binns. He left a mistake in one of his videos that I was like, "Hey, leave this in. It's hilarious." He took it out. I was like, "Shit." I thought it was on purpose. You know, I laugh about crap like that. But maybe I'll send this video to Tom. Now that I got back into contact with him, I think he'll laugh at this. But look, yesterday talked about the worldwide leader in woke. That's ESPN, talking about their history, how they were, they were a very, very innovative network. This is the third time I'm saying it, so hopefully it'll go faster. They were before CNN, which wanted 24-hour news. There was ESPN that wanted, an entirely sports dedicated network. And that was a huge innovation up until, their first competitor in 1996, which was CNNSI and Fox Sports. So for a fair amount of time, ESPN was kind of, alone in that market. SportsCenter, iconic show, Keith Olbermann, Dan Patrick, then later Rich Eisen and Stuart Scott, who, I think all of them were great anchors on SportsCenter. You can say anything you want about anything else they did. Dan Patrick, raging alcoholic. What was the other guy? Stuart Scott I never really warmed to, but he was a good person. But I didn't like his style. Rest in peace. I think he was a good reporter. And who else? Rich Eisen was pretty good. Keith Olbermann, I don't really remember his era on SportsCenter. Was a little before my time, but I certainly remember his time as a political commentator, and there's more on that today. Because, ESPN, they just don't know how to like separate, the bacon from, the mosque, if I can say it that way. There are certain things that, they come together. I'm going to get a fucking strike for that, but they come together and people get bent out of shape, and, what are you going to do? So here was the first episode that I remember personally from watching ESPN, a live broadcast. I was like, yeah, this network's going in the shitter. This is when Jason Collins came out as gay. This player that, don't know anything about him. Maybe he's a nice guy. Nobody gave a shit about some bit player who was, basically kind of a rebounder, rebounding center, coming out as gay. Everybody was like, yeah, whatever. Played for the New Jersey Nets, which were a garbage team anyway. Still are, even though they play in Brooklyn. So here's LZ Granderson and Chris Broussard arguing about that, and it goes from a gay player to shifting into a whole debate about what does Christianity really mean? Well, thank you, ESPN. I thought we were talking about, basketball, shooting buckets, getting buckets. I'm wearing my Kyrie Irving jersey. I'm still sore over him being traded. So here we go.
What did you make of Wallace's tweets?
I think we need to allow for some of this conversation to happen. I'm not one that wants to stranglehold a respectable conversation because someone disagrees with me. And in full disclosure, Chris and I have known each other for a long time, and we've had this conversation many, many times, and we both happen to be on opposite ends of the spectrum on this conversation, but we have the conversation respectfully, and as long as it's respectful, I don't care if someone wanting to know more about the conversation. I think that there is a knee-jerk reaction sometimes that people have, and that as soon as someone doesn't come out in full support, you want to shout down and not hear what a person has to say. I think if we really want to move towards progress and move towards full acceptance, we have to have this conversation and this process. And the conversation really about the locker room, because that seems to be the crux of what everyone is hesitant about. So I think the NBA, as well as the NFL, NHL, and MLB, needs to also have respectful, intelligent conversation about the locker room, right, and not avoid it or bash the person.
Go ahead, Chris.
But to have that conversation.
I like to second what else.
So before we keep going, LZ Granderson is the gay guy For those of you who don't know, LZ Granderson is a writer for CNN, apparently well, I knew he was from ESPN, also apparently for CNN. And Chris Broussard is the big NBA reporter at the time for ESPN. And they're both saying, we've talked about this off air before. It's a conversation we have. We don't agree, blah, 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 agree to disagree. So this is you would think, setting up a free speech debate. Not so fast.
LZ said, because I'm a Christian, I don't agree with homosexuality. I think it's a sin, as I think all sex outside of marriage between a man and a woman is. And LZ knows that. He and I have played on basketball teams together for several years. We've gone out, had lunch together. We've had good conversations, good laughs together. He knows where I stand, and I know where he stands. I don't, criticize him.
So for, just in case anybody's doubting it, I looked up some other videos of Chris Broussard off of ESPN. And yeah, he's really into Christianity. And, that's just his position. And this is what this is about. And, it's about player reaction, because they were talking about a player reaction. So look where they take it.
He doesn't criticize me and call me a bigot, call me ignorant, call me intolerant. And that's what I hear. And talking to some people around the league, there are a lot of Christians in the NBA. And they don't want to be, just because they disagree with that lifestyle, they don't want to be viewed and called bigoted and intolerant and things like that. And that's what LZ was getting at. Just like I may tolerate someone whose lifestyle I disagree with, he can tolerate my beliefs, and he disagrees with my beliefs and my lifestyle. But true tolerance and acceptance is being able to handle that as mature adults and not criticize each other and call each other names.
There's a difference, I believe, between tolerance. LZ, is there a difference between tolerance and acceptance, LZ?
Well, absolutely there is. And, I just wanted to say, just for the record, I, too, am a Christian. I don't think that a person's views on sexual orientation is exclusive to one branch or one sort of interpretation of the Bible versus another. I, too, identify as a Christian. And there is a difference between tolerance and acceptance. And there's a difference between name-calling and fact-checking. And I think that what we need now is patience and more intelligent conversation to happen. That there is a point, I believe, in which you can identify someone's behavior or language as being bigoted. And there is a point in which you can identify someone's curiosity as not having all the facts or being misinformed. And I think the only way you can delineate between those two is by having the uncomfortable conversations. Chris and I have had the uncomfortable conversations. The NBA now needs to have those uncomfortable conversations, just as the military did back in 2010 with the overturning of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. You're going to have the uncomfortable conversations, but you don't get any movement without some friction. This is going to be a little bit of friction, but the NBA will survive this just like it has survived integration for race.
Now, Chris.
So, he kind of throws Chris Broussard under the bus for this one, and he never gets out from under the bus.
He mentioned in his article, Jason, that he is a Christian as well. So what's your take on that?
Personally, I don't believe that you can live an openly homosexual lifestyle or an openly premarital sex between heterosexuals. If you're openly living that type of lifestyle, then the Bible says you know them by their fruits. It says that. Okay,
I just want to say here, the moment somebody brings up the Bible, that really is, that's what Christianity is. It's not what you decide it to be. Chris Broussard, you could disagree and you can say, Christianity, whatever you want to think about it. Some people say Christianity is nonsense, but, that's his belief system. And he cites the most authoritative source in Christianity, which is the Bible. And, I think he's well within his rights here to say, with all due respect to LZ Granderson, it's not me or you who decides what is correct under this religion or not.
That's a sin. And if you're openly living in unrepentant sin, whatever it may be, not just homosexuality, adultery, fornication, premarital sex between heterosexuals, whatever it may be, I believe that's walking in open rebellion to God and to Jesus Christ. So I would not characterize that person as a Christian because I don't think the Bible would characterize him as a Christian.
LZ, your response?
Well, my response is that faith, just like love, just like marriage, is personal. And that if you try to use a...
Look, you know, there's personal perspectives on everything, but this is something that is in the actual Bible. So, you know, sorry, LZ Granderson.
Broad brush to paint everyone's faith. What you really are painting is a world in which is comfortable for you, and not a world in which, in this country, we're allowed various forms of religion. And just because someone doesn't agree with one person's interpretation of the Bible versus the other, doesn't mean that they have the exclusive rights to dictate what that person, how that person should live. I would love not to have premarital sex, but in this...
So, you know, he gets even further into it, but this isn't what Chris Broussard is saying is Christianity. It's what the Christian Bible says is is Christianity.
In this country, I'm not allowed to get married. So I do what a brother needs to do. Now, if you want to have a conversation about...
No. At the time, there was no legalized gay marriage in the United States. But you could get married, quote unquote. I don't want to get into the South Park quote, but you could get married, so to speak, in one of these churches, these like progressive churches. You know, there are a lot of these mainline Protestant churches, in fact. And they would marry you, and you know, you could do it. It just the state didn't recognize, and they said, you know, tough luck, Buttercup. Go back to the, you know, the chorus line or wherever it is you work. You know, we don't have gay marriage. Sorry, you can do it at that. You know, those people do it, but we're just not going to recognize it. So he's behaving as if, I can't get legally married, so therefore I'd be living in sin anyway. No, even if you were not a gay guy, you would still, and you were, you know, banging some chick out by Chris Broussard's religion, you would not be living in, you know, walking with Christ, whatever it is they say. I'm not Christian. So, you know, it's a semantic argument where LZ Granderson is completely out of his mind. You know, first of all, even if gay, you know, even if you know, he's technically committing two sins because it's extramarital gay sex. So the gay sex is it's already against the Bible, and then on top of that, he can't get married according to the biblical thing. There is no gay marriage. So what do you want? I mean, we're not talking about state-issued marriage licenses. It's completely different. I mean, the government doesn't work according to Chris Broussard's church's dictates.
The constitutionality of things like the Defense of Marriage Act, we can have that conversation. If you want to talk about the constitutionality of the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, we can have that conversation. But we can't say, on one hand, from a spiritual perspective, that the Bible says X, Y, and Z, but then set up a system, a federal government system, in which you further ostracize a collection of people and then point fingers at them and label them sinners because they're not able to fulfill what they want in their hearts spiritually.
The two things have nothing to do with each other, because, you know, even in these churches, even today, you know, maybe he couldn't envision this at the time, but, you know, he would have been very naive to think that even with legalization of gay marriage, you know, most of these churches are like, yeah, even if you, I mean, yeah, it's legal, but we still don't think it's moral. You know, that's the way most of these churches that opposed it before are now, you know, they're still like, you know, yeah, change the friggin' law. We still have what's written here in the you know, the Bible that I don't have next to me.
So I think there's a lot of layers in this conversation that needs to be peeled. And to simply say, well, you're having premarital sex, and oh, by the way, I'm not going to let you get married, I think is setting us up to be called sinners, which isn't fair, which isn't what the Bible calls for. It calls for us to love and treat each other as we want to be treated. And I think anyone in our position, in our situation, and by I'm speaking the LGBT community, will be very frustrated with that. But even in the face of all of that, I will tell you that I still follow Jesus Christ. He is my personal Lord and Savior. And I really don't need Chris or anyone else telling me if I'm a Christian, because Jesus tells me I am.
Well, this is certainly a conversation that will continue, and it's good to have this conversation. We appreciate Elsie Granderson, Chris Broussard joining us today here on Outside the Lines.
Okay, notice what was said in the wake of that. Even TV Guide, which is not exactly the most, opinionated at the time. When I grew up, TV Guide was just, yeah, this is what's on TV. They said ESPN responds to Chris Broussard's homophobic comments, and it's, they apologized. It said that we regret that a respectful discussion of personal viewpoints became a distraction from today's events. ESPN is fully committed to diversity and welcomes Jason Collins' announcement. The thing is, they asked Chris Broussard his personal opinion about this, and that's it. So if you don't want Chris Broussard's personal opinion, one of the most openly Christian people in the business, then don't ask him. And that was just the beginning. There's more shit. Here's one from First Take. This was after the election of Donald Trump, so this is fast forward 4 years, with Max Kellerman and Will Cain and Stephen A. Smith, the Cowboy Hater Show. First Take.
What does this say about the Astros accepting the invite?
Says they're making a grave error and are on the wrong side of history. And I want to be very clear about this. This has nothing to do with where on the political spectrum you fall, left or right. Nothing. It's not about being progressive or conservative or Democrat or Republican or winning or losing elections. That's not what this is about. I say what I say because what has gone on in this administration is abnormal and must not be normalized. The former national security advisor has already admitted to lying to the feds. There is an investigation ongoing into the Trump administration and collusion with a hostile foreign power that involves our national election. I mean, this is, there's no whataboutism, well, this happened. No, it doesn't. It has never happened in my lifetime. All the president's men seem to be implicated. All the president's men seem to be implicated. That's a reference to the Nixon White House. When I say in my lifetime, I suppose I was 1 year old the last time anything nearly this scandalous occurred with the president, and so, or an administration. And so to do anything to normalize what is going on right now has nothing to do with being a Republican or a Democrat or who you're rooting for politically. It has to do with equal protection under the law and constitutionality and being a patriotic American citizen. You do not normalize this behavior with White House visits, period.
I'm sorry, Max, I don't believe you.
So what he said was largely crap. There were a lot of issues, legal issues, under the Clinton White House. I talk about them all the time. There was, of course, much, 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 much more active collusion with China, and I talk about that all the time in my show. Back in the 1990s, nobody talked about China because it wasn't in the media's interest that Clinton would be indicted for taking campaign donations literally from Chinese government officials. So, and then his whole thing about this is about equal protection under the law. No, it's not. Where? How? What does this have to do with equal protection before the law? So this is Will Cain's response, and you'll notice some facial tics from Max Kellerman.
I don't believe that it has nothing to do with your politics, or at the very least, it has nothing to do with politics. Last time we had this conversation, things got fairly heated. I promised to keep myself a little more between the lines today. I see you nodding, appreciating that.
Thank you very, very much.
I'll do my best.
Do your best. Go ahead.
Here's the thing, Max. Even if I grant you the premise that what you're telling us has nothing to do with left or right or Republican or Democrat, even if I grant you that, the indictment that I have of your position... You don't need to grant it to me.
It doesn't.
All right, fine. Moving along, my indictment of your position on this is more on the fact of dividing us into political and apolitical. It's those that see their worldview primarily or perhaps completely through the political prism, and those who have a broader worldview than simply, hey, how does this play politically? How does this symbolize what I stand for? What is it that I vote? What box do I check? No matter which side you check on, it doesn't matter. The point is your life, are the things you do bigger and broader than politics? And for guys like George Springer, World Series MVP, Houston Astro, it's clear his answer is yes. It's bigger than politics. Here's his quote. In our country, it stands for a lot. It means a lot to a lot of people. I've been there. My grandfather worked in Washington for years. If the team goes, I'm going.
So you can see him have a facial tick right there. That's the first one. I think I saw it 3 times. Maybe I missed one, but we'll count another one.
I see nothing in that statement about whether
there it is again.
or not he supports Donald Trump.
Again.
I see nothing in that statement about which way he voted. I see nothing in that statement about whether or not he wants to normalize.
Again, that's 4 times.
What's going on in this country, whether or not he agrees or disagrees, and what he co-signs or not. Only that he realizes a trip to the White House is what most of us realize it can be. I don't know, honoring tradition, honoring the office, honoring the country, honoring unity, honoring the special accomplishment that you and your teammates have, crossed the finish line of in the past year. It can be those things. And I'm here to tell you, it is those things for most people.
You want to respond to that, Max, before I go in?
Sure, it may be, but these are difficult decisions, or decisions that must be made as adult human beings who are hopefully engaged in the world, aware of the world around them, and make choices. And if you make the choice to see it in the way that you just described, because you're not attempting to normalize an administration, the fact is the effect will be that you are aiding in normalizing an administration that shouldn't be normalized. And if you put your own kind of personal value on honoring some tradition, which, by the way, only goes back to the Reagan White House, then I would say you have chosen poorly.
Max Kellerman, here's why I disagree with you. I disagree.
So this was basically Max Kellerman, who was just insufferable. Basically saying to Will Cain, well, even if you don't intend to help Donald Trump by going to the White House, by normalizing him, you are in fact normalizing him, and that's unacceptable. So either you agree with me or you're an idiot and you're not politically conscious. And this is a weird part where Stephen A. Smith actually agrees to a certain extent with Will Cain.
Agree with you because you act as if anybody who makes the decision to go to this particular White House automatically has attached to themselves and their name as being on the wrong side of history. I don't think everybody's going to look at every single individual and say, you went to the White House, so guess what? You're on the wrong side of history. I think if people espouse political views in support of this administration or in support of this president in light of how he has behaved himself as our commander-in-chief, then your argument elevates in terms of its potency. But if folks are just going there because they're saying, hey, the rest of the team is going on with the team, I don't think that people are going to judge them that way. But let me get to my bigger point here. The biggest reason why I think, Will, that it's a mistake for the Houston Astros to go is because we're talking about Major League Baseball and Major League Baseball's history. Major League Baseball historically has always been the last to the party. The NBA, the NFL, the mosaic that it has become in terms of globalizing its brand, in terms of galvanizing Americans everywhere, they've successfully gone about the business of doing so. Whereas Major League Baseball has been a league that prides itself on holding on to its tradition, doing things its way. They've been very slow to change and to address things that need to be changed in the sport. So if you look at the reigning World Series champions, you've got a Cuban on the squad. You've got somebody from Venezuela on the squad. You've got somebody from Puerto Rico on the squad. We know what the president's rhetoric was about the wall and all of this other stuff. And you can speak to this, and I'll defer to you to some degree.
So this is really Stephen A. Smith putting his foot in his mouth. There's nothing concerning the wall that has to do with either Puerto Rico, which is part of the United States, and if Puerto Ricans want to come to the United States, they can hop on a flight here, and that hasn't changed under Donald Trump, and it probably never will change. Cubans, of course, have to swim out of a communist country in order to get here, or take a life raft or something. That has nothing to do with the wall. Some of them do come through the Mexican border because they'll flee to Cuba from Cuba to Mexico or something and then come here. Venezuela, with all due respect, not really the same issue at all.
Agree here because the Houston Astros are in Texas. I mean, they do represent Texas. You would know. I mean, when you talk about that wall, okay, and you talk
right, Will Kane. I mean, you and your racist buddies down in Texas. That's what he's saying. Stephen A. Smith, the cowboy hater. Even though Houston is one of the more progressive cities in Texas. And Dallas is those are urban areas. They're blue districts or whatever. This has nothing to do with, yes, are most people in Texas a little more conservative than the rest of the country? Yes. But Stephen A. Smith is like, oh, you would know, right? Yeah. After he just assumed things about, Hispanics all over the world that, people from Cuba are offended by the wall. Literally every Cuban that I'm in touch with is like, yeah, we want a fucking wall.
Talk about building that wall, that great big wall, and leaving folks out and not being inclusionary, because that's how some people are interpreting it, even though not everyone. The reality is, if you're the Houston Astros, do you want to be associated with that, even that question, considering the fact that we're talking about Major League Baseball and its history of sort of being slow on the uptake? I'm wondering about that.
But can it be bigger than the president?
I think that's
bigger than this president right now?
That's a fair question.
This was bullshit. Major League Baseball is not behind the times. Hispanic players started playing in Major League Baseball, throughout I think in the 60s and 70s. That was when they started to break into there. Then Asian players in the 90s, Hideo Nomo, personally, I remember, amazing pitcher back then. And then there's various ones from Europe and Australia as well. So no, he's completely full of shit. Baseball is very popular in Japan and the rest of East Asia, Korea especially. And this is where Stephen A. Smith and Max Kellerman show themselves to be basically the Jim Acostas of ESPN. Him and his whole, why are you prioritizing immigrants who are English speaking? Does that mean that only white people can come in? Well, excuse me, but I think in Ghana, their official language is English. I believe in, Jamaica, their first language is English. I believe in the Bahamas, their first language is English. There's a lot of black people in Britain whose first language is English. There's a lot of people from Barbados whose first language is English. How many more? There's a lot of people who learn English overseas in India who know English very fluently. There's a lot of people in, where else do you have to go? There's a lot of people outside the United States who learn English proficiently. And it's the same thing here. The wall, it might offend some of those Venezuelans and Puerto Ricans. What does Puerto Rico have to do with the wall, you idiot? And that's what happens when these people, they get wrapped up in the identity politics where they say, they're Hispanic, they're generic Hispanic, so it's very likely somebody from Puerto Rico will have the exact same opinion as somebody from Guatemala, right? It doesn't make any sense. Then there's the Jamel Hill thing, and it's ironic talking about this while I, between my second and third filmings of this stupid segment. I was reading that Roseanne just got fired for some stupid joke she made about, Valerie Jarrett. And it's ironic that she gets fired when her show is a raging hit. And I don't get it. I don't watch the show. I never really was that into Roseanne. Never had a problem with the show, but, to each their own. But a very popular show. And that's her job as a comedian and as an entertainer, to bring a show that people will watch and boost network ratings. She gets fired like instantly for saying something that I think was like Islamophobic, they said, basically. And maybe like anti-black, I guess, maybe. So ESPN, they fire Curt Schilling in 2016 because of some anti-transgender comment. Let me see if this. Did I leave it out of this portion? Okay, so I do have to fix this. Oh no, I have his name. I have his full name. Sorry. So no, this article is pristine. So they fire Schilling over that, over his anti-transsexual comment. But you know, there is plenty of evidence that due to this shift, you know, what's his name, Barry Blind, who is a VP of marketing over at ESPN or public relations, released a survey that said 64% of its viewers saw the politics and sports mix as being correct. You know, fine. Good for you. Something is wrong. You could say it's not the politics, but what's the excuse for losing 500,000 viewers, as Clay Travis says on his show, Outkick the Coverage, which I am a fan of. I do like that show. And I've actually written to him asking him to feature one of my pieces. But, you know, one can dream. Probably not going to happen. It says, so one of the foremost commentators on this industry trend is Fox Sports radio host and Outkick the Coverage founder Clay Travis, a professed liberal who nevertheless claims that ESPN's political slant is leading it to a slow, painful death. So this is the article from yesterday, or the video from yesterday, where he says this line.
That he wanted to go public with the fact that he was gay. I think a lot of fans started to say, okay, you know, I feel like I'm watching the NFL to see whether or not my team's going to win, not to make a societal statement. And look, I don't.
So that was basically the truest statement ever of how NFL fans and other sports fans feel when they watch ESPN go political. And nothing confirms this more than Jemele Hill, who, you know, she starts getting a national profile in 2017 after she says that Donald Trump is a white supremacist surrounded by white supremacists. And I believe at the time she was not suspended, but she was reprimanded off the air. Then, you know, I'm writing this and I see at one point in 2008 she got into hot water when she analogized the Boston Celtics to Adolf Hitler and was suspended for 1 week. Some jumped on the double standard at the time of former Notre Dame coach Lou Holtz not being suspended from college game day for his own Hitler reference. I mean, everybody loves the Hitler thing. You know, how could you not? I mean, it's such a I mean, nobody wants to not do a Hitler reference one time in their career. I guess it's kind of like, you know, basically like being able to throw an octopus onto the ice during the NHL playoffs. Here's a quick comparison of why the context disproves the comparison. So Hill's attack on the Celtics was an implication that the team's history was racist. The Larry Bird Magic Johnson era did contain some racial tension among fans of the Celtics-Lakers rivalry, but no one died and the two players were friendly. And that the city of Boston had itself a racist past. Now, I do want to make, I didn't add this to the article because it was going to be long anyway, but that year, the top three players on the Celtics were Ray Allen, Kevin Garnett, and Paul Pierce. I mean, I'll even show their faces. So, you know, this is still online. You can see it. The big three, you know, three black guys. This is, I mean, Ray Allen was even in, what was that? He was Jesus Shuttleworth in that movie. Was it Hoop Dreams? Whatever. That wasn't More Than a Game. Like I fucking care anymore. Anyway, so yeah, the Celtics were, by 2008, they were as black identified of a team as you could get. They had a coach that was black, Doc Rivers. And I think the whitest player on the team was Brian Scalabrine, who, you know, it looked like, I mean, they were just having him on the bench. He was basically their school mascot. That was the Celtics in 2008, and nobody. I think Scalabrine was on there almost as a joke, He's a bit player. I think he was in there to rebound and foul people when they needed him. So Holtz's comment was, so the thing is, Detroit has its own racial past. There were racial riots in 1968. Hill doesn't go into that. She basically ignores that issue. Holtz's comment, Lou Holtz, Hall of Fame coach for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. It was a lame joke that lampooned the defenders of Rich Rodriguez, who was the Michigan head coach, Michigan football head coach, Rich Rodriguez. People were saying, well, he's a good leader. I mean, at least that you could say about him. He's like, yeah, I mean, Hitler was a good leader too. He's basically saying, yeah, so what if he's a good leader? He doesn't win. He doesn't win. And people were saying, oh, well, when he says it, it's he doesn't get suspended. Lou Holtz was born, right before World War II. He lived through it. I think he was born like 2 years before it. So he grew up. His childhood was World War II. He served in the Army Reserve, in the 50s. To think that this is comparable, he was making a stupid analogy. Jamel Hill was basically analogizing much closer to that, saying, oh, the Celtics were basically the team of racism. But, her comments last year about Donald Trump, saying that he's a white supremacist surrounded by other white supremacists. Okay, so you could say, fine, freedom of speech or whatever. Let her get away with that one. Her second comment, which eventually people were like, yeah, that's enough. She's suspended, later removed from SportsCenter and put on The Undefeated, which is their racial blog. CNN or ESPN has a racial blog called The Undefeated. So she says, boycott the Dallas Cowboys because Jerry Jones told his players not to kneel during the national anthem. Well, that's a problem because ESPN carries NFL games. Therefore, the NFL is a partnership with ESPN. Therefore, you're calling for an indirect to direct boycott of a partner of the network, right? So that's it. They were like, what are you out of your mind? You're calling to have our own broadcasts if the Cowboys are playing boycotted by fans. You're suspended. Eventually, she was removed from the show. And you see her, she's basically, I've characterized her, I would say she's basically a leech. She's a racial arsonist. She's Al Sharpton in a dress. You see her, she won a National Association of Black Journalism Award. Now, I'm not saying they can't pick whoever they want. It's their award. Last year they picked April Ryan, another super, they call it journalism, but this is political editorial writing, what April Ryan does. So they picked a person, Jamel Hill. You see her, the picture that they picked, not that I picked, this is from their article, was of her at a Hennessy booth, drinking Hennessy, and wearing a Sprite shirt. So this is a woman who's symbolizing black journalism according to The Root, okay? She's wearing a shirt that, for a drink that causes diabetes, while drinking another drink that causes technically alcoholism that is idolized by rappers and hip-hop people, and the relationship, everybody's talking about, there's a health crisis in the black community. Then why are you promoting two things that, technically they're unhealthy for anybody who drinks them? Sprite and Hennessy. Because you're a corporate pawn. These aren't people who are actually activists. They're paid shills. That's what they are. Gotta get some water. So she survived these layoffs in January. And ESPN basically decided, we're going to take her off of SportsCenter eventually. And meanwhile, they fire or lay off John Clayton, Jerome Bettis, an awesome running back from the 90s and 2000s, played for the Steelers and the Rams. Whether you like the Steelers or not, Jerome Bettis was like a sight to behold. He would just batter through a line. He was also a good on-screen personality. Trent Dilfer, personally, I never really thought he was that great, but as an analyst, not bad. Super Bowl winning quarterback. And then NCAA basketball analyst and former University of Maryland superstar Len Elmore, who also had an NBA career. So all these people that have more credible resumes than Jamel Hill, they get laid off in January. And this is a mix of black and white people. Right? I didn't see any Hispanic journalists on that list, but I don't really, let's not get too far down the rabbit hole on this one. So instead, she was shifted to the network's social and cultural blog, The Undefeated, which is this one. So they have a social, and this is all about race. There's 2 articles. I was looking earlier on the screw up one that I had to delete. This is Queen Sugar, it's just a TV show. It has nothing to do with sports. They do 2 pieces on it. What does that have to do with sports? We're not, those of us that criticize ESPN, we haven't racialized ESPN. They've taken it from a network, and this is run by ESPN, The Undefeated. They've taken a network that was once very much about sports and athletics, and it's about race. It is. So, back to the article. So she wrote a couple good pieces on Michigan State, which she's a Michigan State alumnus. So she had very good articles about Larry Nassar. This is Jamel Hill again I'm talking about. Larry Nassar and Tom Izzo. But no, she has just gone over and over again to the mat for saying that Josh Rosen is getting a taste of what outspoken black athletes experience all the time. No. When she was writing this on March 9th, this was a long time after. Josh Rosen has been criticized several times by a lot of people for all sorts of things, especially saying that the University of Alabama is only successful because it has a low SAT requirement, and that's why it can recruit good football players. He's been criticized before. It has nothing to do with race. She criticized Ed Glazer of the Tampa Bay Bucks, one of their owners, for hosting a fundraiser for Donald Trump and saying, oh, that's hypocrisy regarding Colin Kaepernick. No, it isn't. Because he didn't do it on the job. He used his money to mount an event that, supports something that he believes in politically, and that's it. Now, we could argue that campaign finance reform is needed, and we can't have these super PACs and separate money from politics and, et cetera, whatever, overturn Citizens United. That's not what she's arguing here. And so therefore, what exactly is the problem? When you want to talk about things off the air, that's your personal business. And as she well knows, it can still get you in trouble. But first of all, this is the owner of the Buccaneers. So there's no boss to tell him what the policy is. He is the boss. He owns the team. And that's the way the NFL works. And she knows that. She knows it's a business. Second of all, Colin Kaepernick is the opposite of this case. This is a guy who took his personal beliefs, if you can call them that. I don't even know what he believes half of the time. He doesn't have a stated goal. And he took them to the stadium and he started wearing socks that portray officers as police officers as pigs and sits on the bench or whatever. And I've always maintained that his political beliefs are a fraud. I've always said, and we might get into this later with Akil Aline. I think he's going to be on tonight. Basically, my position is this. Colin Kaepernick used this wedge issue in order to try to get himself traded from the 49ers, and it was a failure. And once he was in it, he was so knee deep in it that he figured, I'm just going to go full on, balls to the wall, social justice warrior and keep going. And that's why he wore that stupid Castro and Malcolm X shirt, and then he's like, oh, I didn't think, why are people offended that Fidel Castro is on the shirt? I was wearing it because Malcolm X is on the shirt. You just get a shirt that has Malcolm X on it then. And then people want to, that's a separate video, entirely separate video. Why Fidel Castro's icon status among the black community is they don't understand. This is a guy who sent troops to Ethiopia to enforce a regime that was starving people to death. Okay, so Colin Kaepernick if he doesn't know that, then he should research it, or he should stop pretending he knows what Fidel Castro did for people. Also, there's this myth about him helping people during the hurricane and the Bush administration turning it down. So I'll say one more thing about that. In 2006, or was it 2005, when Hurricane Katrina hit, Castro offered aid in the value of $1 million to help with Hurricane Katrina, which is nice. But there were countries that were offering in the area of $50 million of aid. Mexico even sent troops and help. And Russia sent, I think it was like $20 million. So, yeah, they turned it down, but that's because Cuba had, first of all, I think they were saying that they want in exchange for the aid, they want the embargo lifted. So, like George Bush was like, I mean, we don't need $1 million so that you can have your embargo lifted. We're getting plenty of aid from around the world. Thank you very much. You can criticize the move, but it wasn't that big of a gesture by Fidel Castro relative to the aid offered by other countries. And then, you get to the Undefeated itself. It was founded by, what's his name? Jason, I forgot his name. He's up at the top. Jason Whitlock, yeah. And he was fired and replaced later by Kevin Merida, who is not a sports reporter. All of his published work has to do with politics or non-sports matters. He first of all, he was working for the Washington Post for a long time before joining ESPN. He wrote a book criticizing Clarence Thomas in a very direct biography that attacked him. Then he wrote a photographic montage of the Barack Obama 2008 presidential campaign. And what else was there? And a retrospective of the Million Man March. Again, political, racial issue. So this was not about sports, and it never was. This is about them making political points. And Kevin Merida, probably, a decent writer, a decent journalist. Nothing against him personally. ESPN used to be a sports network. When they hire people like this to take central positions, they're signaling to the people, well, this is not about sports. It's about going into something that has nothing to do with sports. Sports is a peripheral issue by then. And what I wrote was, where did I put it? Yeah, it says, but he's not a sports reporter, and The Undefeated is therefore not a sports blog, but a racial and cultural topics news page with a hint of jock interest. And that's how it is. They'll interview athletes once in a while. And there was this one, which I featured before, which Jamel Hill is appearing on Out of Bounds, a hip-hop magazine, with Gilbert Arenas, who is a real athlete. He played for the Washington Wizards, was arrested on a firearms charge like 10 years ago. And this is what she says.
But I do think this is, to me, what is so troublesome, I guess, for athletes who have to deal with social media now, is that it brought the fan they're inside the velvet rope now. And so a lot of times, at least before, previous athletes, like, they might get a snail mail letter. Yeah. They might get, calls. Of course, at games, people would say things. But I feel bad for a lot of these athletes because they're constantly inundated with this. Yeah. That's why somebody like Kevin Durant, who has obviously struggled in this area, why it's hard for him to get the separation. Because I notice when I talk to young people, a lot of them are just so much living their lives on social media that they can't create any dissonance. Like, they cannot create any distance between, what is reality and what's on social media. It means so much to them.
Because it's like, that's their reality. They don't understand. This is what, like somebody like athletes got to understand. There's people like me on there that gets a kick out of frustrating people. Just irritating, because it's not a real world to me, it's fake. Right. So I go on there and act a donkey just to piss people off. Right. Because they take it so seriously. Yeah. And that's my whole goal, is to fucking frustrate the shit out of people, because it's ruining their days for no reason. Like, just It's like getting yelled at on the phone. There's a fucking off button. But they don't understand that. But so they just sit there because our minds say, all right, I love you, Gil. I love you, Gil. I love you. You're a douchebag. Oh, I'm going to comment to this one.
Right.
We go for the negative. Yeah. We go for the negative response, and that's what gets. So if somebody wants attention, they know what to say. They know what to do. Right.
Well, some of it too is just though. I mean, at least this is where, because I'm not perfect at it, and I will.
So this is a big moment.
Like I mean, I sort of use the following I have against the person or people that may tweet something negative. You know, to me, it's like my followers will handle it. Like I got goons out there, Twitter goons out there. Like they'll.
Yeah, that's against the Twitter terms of service. You know, you're not allowed to Twitter brigade and harass people using, you know, it's called Twitter brigading. You know, coordinated attacks, I think, is what it's more properly known as. So that's the first thing she says that's kind of fucked up.
They'll work you over a lot worse than I am.
You let them cross the line.
I do. Like me, I just, you know, I'll make a funny comment about it because, you know, at the end of the day, every other Thursday, you know what happens? Direct deposit.
Talk about it.
So, like,
Talk
you
about
keep
it.
saying it, like, great. Like, until one of these negative tweets is from Bob Iger, you know, the chairman of Disney, then I don't have anything to worry about.
So when you see Jemele Hill say something like that, she's signaling that she believes she's now in that rarefied atmosphere of people that says, I don't care what the viewer says. I don't care what the people, you know, the ESPN audience thinks. The only person who I care what his opinion is Bob Iger of Disney, which is interesting because that goes above, you know, let's say John Skipper, who was her previous boss, you know, at this time not. I don't know who the new guy is. She's saying basically, I don't even care what the head of ESPN says. She specifically mentioned the chairman of Disney, and this shows that this is about her and herself, looking at herself as a great celebrity. Now, you know, at this point, she is a celebrity thanks to her Twitter war with Donald Trump or whatever. Now, is that helping ESPN? No, because you can still see that the numbers are still falling. We don't know if I mean, we can't just blame Jemele Hill for it. But at a time when the network is losing viewership anyway, why would they want to keep somebody who's fighting, you know, with fans all the time, scaring people away, basically with her comments and whatever? Yeah, that this is somebody who is saying, you know, my political beliefs are big enough, and you know my desire to get into a fight with somebody is fine as long as the chairman of Disney doesn't have a problem with it. Not whether she thinks that this is going to be for the betterment of ESPN. So she's basically saying, you know, my moral compass, not moral compass, but my decision making, on this matter is only incumbent on whether my boss gets pissed off, not whether it actually helps the company. Because you can still try to help the company even if you disagree with your boss. And that's why ESPN is losing some viewers, because this is, in this clip, you can see this is the attitude of people like Jemele Hill. It's probably, you know, not to just pick on her, because I do discuss her very frequently. It's the attitude of Max Kellerman. It's the attitude of Stephen A. Smith. That's the way that they behave, and they've gone even worse. Here they bring in this idiot. This is their new old hire. The sixth time that Keith Olbermann is being brought back now. Yes, he had a great run on SportsCenter back in the day, which, you know, I personally never really saw because I wasn't watching SportsCenter in the early 90s. You know, I was probably watching more other things, you know, like TBS or whatever, TBS baseball with the Atlanta Braves. But, you know, let's see. This is a guy that they're saying, well, we're not a political network, but we're going to hire this guy.
I'm Keith Olbermann, and this is The Resistance. In Donald Trump's America, if you go over the top and fantasize about an act of violence against him, he and those speaking for him declare that you are evil, that you have injured his teenage son, that your livelihood must be destroyed. If he goes over the top and fantasizes about an act of violence, he offers no explanation. He offers no apology. He offers no promise that he will ever stop doing this. He offers no awareness.
Now, to be clear, why was he even referring to Trump's teenage son? Well, I didn't remember this at the time, last time I looked at this clip, but it was Barron Trump and Rosie O'Donnell. She said, this was this. She said that Barron Trump has autism. Now, how would she even know? Maybe he does. And if he does, then I don't care. I have people that I know that are autistic. So what the hell do you care? So, it was Rosie O'Donnell being an idiot. So it wasn't Donald Trump getting injured by it. It was people who were like, why don't you just mind your own business, moron?
That he is doing exactly the same thing about which he plays the victim. In Donald Trump's America, if somebody has hijacked and sabotaged your religion or your heritage or your skin color, he and those speaking for him declare that you are nevertheless a threat. You are automatically guilty anyway. You are a terrorist. If his own people do that, he will never say they are a threat. He will never say they are.
So this was Charlottesville again, where he did condemn them, and he did say that neo-Nazism is wrong. And he has condemned them in the past.
Are automatically guilty. He will never say they are terrorists.
He did.
In Donald Trump's America, if you have a television program that is not about politics, and if you have a Twitter account not affiliated with that program or the network that carries it, and you dare to call him out on it as a racist, he and those speaking for him will declare a, quote, untruth, will demand an apology from your employer, will insist you should be fired. If he does that, if he calls the president a racist from a Twitter account not affiliated with his show nor the network that carried it, he will not even remember he did it. The president behaves like a dictator with no interest in the First Amendment, nor the Constitution, nor free speech. We know that. The president behaves like a white supremacist who, even when given a series of passes for his own appalling sympathy for the Nazis and the KKK, he must tear those passes up and
never said he had sympathy. He never said he had sympathy for the Nazis and the KKK. Not even once did he say it. Okay, this is who ESPN is bringing back as an on-air personality. Okay, this is factually false the whole way. How he thought that the whole Rosie O'Donnell insulting Barron Trump thing was not kind of just a stupid incident that if my kid was insulted by a comedian based on something like, oh, well, maybe he's autistic, it's like, maybe you're a moron. Maybe you should stop eating moon pies, Rosie.
Default back to the public statements, mitigating their horror and their hatred. We know that. The president behaves like a man with little or no control over his own violent fantasies. This dream of hitting a golf ball hard enough off Hillary Clinton's back to cause her to collapse is just the latest. There was that wrestling meme against the media, the taunting of an unstable foreign leader waiting for an excuse to start a war.
Yeah, these are all things that Donald Trump, except for the taunting Kim Jong-un, that he shared other people's memes. It's not his fantasy. Other people said, oh, let's show him golfing and knocking Hillary Clinton over. But Keith, I was about to say Keith Ellison, for once, I mean, Keith Ellison's okay in this clip, Take a breather, Keith Ellison. You're fine today. Keith Olbermann is obsessed. He's literally obsessed with Donald Trump in this clip. And things that when you share somebody else's meme, that's a hilarious take, knocking Hillary Clinton over with a golf ball, or a wrestling meme where you're basically beating the shit out of CNN. That's called a sense of humor. Something that Keith Olbermann lost when he went into his mom's basement.
Encouragement of violence against others during his campaign, the pussy grabber tape, violence and misogynistic violence and sexual violence are in this man's soul. We know that. But perhaps even in the context of these nightmare realities, that there's not just a person like this who is not in a home somewhere, but that this person has seized power and is erasing our democracy day by day. Even considering that horror, we may have missed the true overarching point of Donald Trump's America, which is simply this. If something is done to Trump, he has been wronged. He is a victim. He is under attack. But if the same exact thing is done by Trump, it's fine, or you are overreacting, or America has enough of political correctness, or you don't have a right to say it. Donald Trump is a human double standard. Of all the existential perils he presents to our country and our lives, none may be worse than this. For 200 years, we have defeated those who would turn free speech off and on like a light switch. For 50 years, we have beaten back the racists and the anti-Semites. For 30 years, we have suppressed the misogynists and the sexists. For 20 years, we have begun to push back against the violent and the bullies and those who excuse violent fantasies and bullying as simply another aspect of expression or their culture. But now Trump has indicated to all of those people, all of these vermin, all of these scum, that what is wrong with them, the need to silence others, the need to hate blacks and Jews and almost any group to which they do not personally belong, the need to treat women as chattel, the need to be violent or to fantasize about violence, he has essentially told them that not only is it not wrong anymore, not only that they can do all these things with his permission, but that they alone can do all these things. And if there is the slightest response, the slightest fighting of a Charlottesville fire with fire, the slightest pursuit of justice, they may
Yeah, so here Keith Olbermann is essentially saying, if there is violence in these rallies, for example, in Virginia, it's okay for that to be met with other citizen violence. So he's saying, okay, so if there are white supremacists marching, the solution to that is not for even the law to deal with that. We need mobs of people to deal with that and them to get into like big fist fights and whatever. He's saying, well, that's the appropriate response. That's exactly what he said. Let's rewind for 1 second.
These things. And if there is the slightest response, the slightest fighting of a Charlottesville fire with fire, the slightest pursuit of
fire with fire. Even though the fact of the matter is that the white supremacists in that march, and I'm not supporting them, but the court gave them a permit to march. Okay, the court did not give a permit for Antifa to come in and do whatever the fuck they did. They basically fighting with the marchers.
Justice. They may pretend as if they have been oppressed and if they have been victims and if they have become martyrs. If it is done by Trump or by extension, if it is done by these dysfunctional cretins the rest of American society has tolerated for decades, it is free speech and justice and make America great again.
Yeah, the Charlottesville March. Okay, just so for anybody who forgot, okay, so, the ACLU won the case for the neo-Nazis and the other marchers for the Confederate monument. People don't even remember that the march was about a removal of a monument. So the ACLU, it says right here on PBS, right, one of the few networks that has not fired Keith Olbermann yet for personnel issues. It says the ACLU filed a lawsuit against the city citing the national organization's long-held belief to uphold the rights of free speech for all. So the ACLU, super liberal organization, they were the people who represented the Nazis and the other groups.
If it is done to Trump, or by extension, if it is done to those still too stupid to see he is conning them, it is treason and untruth.
Okay, attacking the intelligence of voters. There you go. So he's, very great. You're bringing this guy onto, ESPN, this guy who attacks people who support Donald Trump as stupid, and evil. So you're either stupid or you're evil.
And it is disseminated by the, quote, enemy of the American people. The human double standard is in the White House. The creator of racial division and untruth in this country is in the White House.
The creator of human division and untruth. Yeah, that was all created by him. Sure.
The enemy of the American people is in the White House.
The enemy of the American people is in the White House.
And his removal
he's on ESPN.
Can no longer wait. Resist. Remove. Peace.
And he gives the basically this, by the way, you know, if you watch images of Adolf Hitler, you know, he does it this way, but there are other images of him accepting the salute. Yeah, there you go. It's the same thing. Keith Olbermann. Olbermann, by the way, is a German name. I mean, he has two N's at the end of his name. Why is Trump any more of a Hitler than him? Yeah, here you go. Everybody's saluting. He holds his hand up like this. Now people are going to frame me like this. You can't win. Yeah, Keith Olbermann. By the way, you know, we're going to finish now. This has gone over time anyway, but, you know, what are you going to do? At least I didn't fuck with a mic this time. Keith Olbermann has already, you know, made a name for himself as an awful person to work for. You know, the fashion sense is always made fun of, but, you know, I guess he was working for GQ. Maybe that got better. It says Keith's camera people and the show's director liked his anchor producer. Sometimes they do a bump shot that panned off her face, you know, for that newsroom effect out of or into a commercial break. He made them stop because the show is about me, not about her. So then this is from Gawker. But, you know, in this day and age, I mean, is Gawker less reliable than ESPN? I don't think so. So more than a year into her employment, he started getting headaches from the perfume of one of his staff members. The perfume one of his staff members wore. I know sense sensitivity is a real thing, and I'm sympathetic to it, but this also coincided with her moving up on his shit list. So he had a famous shit list of people that he would abuse and basically, you know, bully them into quitting. So instead of taking the normal HR route of asking her not to wear the perfume, he banished her from coming into his office. And if I remember correctly, had her desk moved further away. At one point, again, if I remember correctly, she stopped wearing the perfume, but he claimed he could still smell on her clothes. She was a very sweet, very hardworking and professional woman, and he bullied her out of her job. So then it says the scent sensitivity resulted in literally months of him playing musical offices between 3 adjacent offices to get away from the smell of paint from a construction job he had requested. This continued even after they brought in fans to diffuse the fumes, had other people evaluate the fume situation, etc. The musical offices game was accompanied with his shitty moods. And then, this one I haven't read yet, but periodically Keith would decide for no apparent reason or for a stupid reason that he'd yell at us for as soon as he got in, like the car company sending the wrong car for him. God forbid if they sent an SUV, that no one was allowed to bother him in his office until the show. Of course, segment producers have to brief him on the pre-interviews they did with the guests that were to appear on his show that night. So they'd have to break this rule and incur his wrath in order to do their jobs, which helped him do this. Which helped him do his. Sometimes they were forbidden from even doing that. They'd have to leave a post-it on his door instead. He gave MSNBC's ad department a photo to use in print ads they were making, but they went with his standard headshot against an NBC color background instead. This is reasonable. It upholds the brand. This caused him to have a temper tantrum. Part of his reaction was to bang his entire phone against his desk before throwing it against the wall in his office. This kind of outburst and its lack of proportion to the offense is par for the course with him. So he's freaking out about, this is, by the way, this is linked to in the in my article. But Keith Olbermann, is a garbage person. And for ESPN to think, oh, we're going to hire him and, you know, bring back people. No, you're not going to bring back people. You know, the network is off the rails. We're going to be talking about Kaepernick probably later tonight. Don't know yet. I'm going to set a live stream, but it could get canceled with Akil concerning the Kaepernick thing. We might deal a little with this, so please stay tuned and please comment, share, and subscribe and like the video. And have a great rest of your day.